Let's dive into something called a low-frequency oscillator, or LFO for short. Now, this isn't your average oscillator. LFOs are more like behind-the-scenes kind of oscillators, usually used to shape and influence different aspects of your sound. Human hearing falls between 20 Hz and 20,000 Hz or 20 kHz. And LFOs work at frequencies lower than that. So low that we can't hear them directly. So instead we use them to modulate or change other parameters in our sound. But LFOs aren't just limited to these super low frequencies. They can also operate in ranges above 20 Hz, which means if you want to, you can actually hear their output. When they're in this range, we call it audio rate, meaning we can actually hear the signal. So to sum it up, both VCOs and LFOs are oscillators, but LFOs are special because they operate at low frequencies and are perfect for modulating signals. Now let's have a look at how this works. You can now pause this video and try and recreate the basic patch from the previous lesson, or you can watch me doing it again. So a VCO, a VCA, an audio, select your audio device output, now volume down, and let's patch a square wave in. I will right-click and choose specific color cables this time, so it's easier to see the two connections I'm going to make. Now let's add the oscilloscope. Right-click, scope. Let's patch it into the square wave so we can see it. And now let's add the LFO, so the low frequency oscillator. I'm typing LFO. And as usual, let's use the fundamental library module. Okay, so now we have everything in, let's check out the LFO. As you can see, the default position on the frequency knob on the LFO is 2 Hz. So although this is an oscillator, it's already set to run at very low frequencies in comparison to the VCO here. Let's run the sine wave into our scope from this LFO. You can see how slow the LFO is in comparison to the green square wave coming out of the VCO. The LFO is set to 2 Hz, so we won't be able to hear it, because human hearing ranges from 20 Hz to 20 kHz. But let's increase the frequency to get an audio rate signal, so a signal that we can hear. Now, when we patch this LFO, we will be able to hear it because it's now above 20 Hz. So let's connect it to our mixer. And there you go. This means you could use an LFO in its audible frequencies as a second oscillator if you wanted to. So both VCO and LFO are oscillators, but LFO runs by default at low frequencies, and we normally use them to modulate other parameters, for example to add movement to the sound. Another unique property of an LFO is that they often have a unipolar switch. What exactly is unipolar? Let's look at the oscilloscope and our sine wave. So the upper region here is the positive voltage, the middle line here is 0 voltage, and the bottom area is negative voltage region. You can see in VCV we have 5 negative to 5 positive voltage, so the peak to peak is 10 volts. Now, a unipolar signal is a signal that operates in most cases completely in the positive range of voltage. Let me show you what this looks like. So unipolar is just 0 to positive voltage, and a bipolar signal is when the signal runs between both negative and positive voltage range. So either like this, half and half, or like this. As long as it crosses over the 0 line, it's a bipolar signal. So unipolar, completely positive, bipolar, positive and negative. I'm using something called offset here, and what this does is it's changing the baseline voltage level, but it doesn't alter the shape of the waveform. Now, what does this offset button do on our LFO? Exactly the same. So it changes the output of the LFO from unipolar of 0 to 10 volts to bipolar. We will use it later in this course. For now, let's remember unipolar is completely positive voltage and bipolar is both positive and negative voltage.